let's go through the case study one. The case study one is Adelaide, and I'm showing you, getting back again to that sort of theoretical framework which we developed as human health and well-being as the top priority of system thinking. I want to show you that how political planning context, in fact, the third priority in a city, could affect the health and human well-being, which is the first priority. And this is the case of Adelaide. I want to show you how governance structure created permanent vulnerability in in Adelaide metropolitan areas since the last, during the last 30 years or so. Now, before going through that, I want to give you a very quick sort of overview of colonial origin and the state power in Adelaide. Adelaide, founded in 1837 by Colonel Light, the design of Colonel Light, in a grid system and in between flanking a river, Torrens River in this case. And then in 1880, this is the urban development in 1880, and this is the modern boundaries of metropolitan areas. You can see small areas of the city being developed, and the rest of that would be parklands. And then this is the late 19th century, almost 20th century city development in Adelaide. And as you can see, Adelaide grid was imposed by governors, and that template, the state authority, again continued and persists to this day. And local councils, from the very origin, from the very beginning, inherited consequences they had no power to prevent. Now, this is even giving you a better picture, if you like. This is a strategic planning timeline of Greater Adelaide. You can find this in our paper published in Planning Institute of Australia, Australian Strategic Planning and Socio-Spatial Vulnerability. You can Google that and download that paper, but this is part of that paper. It clearly shows that every major decision from 1962, even before, to 2017 was made at the state level. Each launched with ambition, district centers, transit-oriented developments, with the big language of livability. Look, almost all of them are state level. So there's nothing happening through the local governments, and nothing is really proposed by local governments until the latest one, 2017 model. And now this is the outcome. This is the outcome of those top-down processes, if you like. 5 maps, 5 censuses, 30 years of disadvantage. And as you can see, these patches, these gray areas are the extent of disadvantaged areas below average from 1996 all the way through to 2006, 2011, 2016, and 2021. What you can see here clearly, of course, the methods of calculating IRSD could be different over the course of 30 years, but you can see a clear sort of pattern here, the north of the city, the center, and then it even extends towards the south. And this is the outcome of that. And I want you to, from now on, look into your cities with the lens of vulnerability in order to fulfill system thinking in your design and planning. Now, going through the actual strategic plans, you can see here that, for example, in proposed Adelaide growth in 1987, the plan suggested some metropolitan districts separate from each other, divided by hill face zones. But in almost less than 4 years, by 1999, the extent of vulnerability, which is these red patches, are going well beyond the proposed areas. See how planning gets behind the actual needs of the communities. See what happened in Adelaide in 1987 plan. Again, this happens in 1992, where the city authorities proposed the 2020 Adelaide vision. And you can see that this is the boundary, proposed boundary. And then in almost around 14 years, the extent of vulnerable communities, the red patches, go well beyond these proposed areas, and almost half a city is covered by vulnerability. And you can see the same pattern here in 2006, where in 2011, almost 1/3 or half of the city is covered by vulnerability. Why is that? Why this has happened? Now, we get into the current time, getting closer to the current time, you see the same pattern just happened where this is the 2017 version and this is 2010 version of the Greater Adelaide plan for Greater Adelaide, 30-year plan for Greater Adelaide. And as you can see, the actual vulnerability is happening in these areas, but the city authorities, the state level governance propose these thoughts in order to ameliorate the city, in order to help the city to grow. So it looks like pretty irrelevant, given that thoughts are the signature component of the plan for years and years. Again, this happens in 2017, while the city officials propose capital cities and propose those thoughts around the center of the city. The vulnerability is quietly extending outwards towards the northern and southern suburbs. And this is the map that concludes the Adelaide research, if you like. This is the map of vulnerability for 5 censuses. So since 1996, these very black areas or very gray areas are part of the vulnerable suburbs of Adelaide. And as you can see, the regional centers are engulfed by vulnerability. These regional centers were proposed in order to improve the life of a human being, but look how they've been stuck inside these vulnerable components, vulnerable patches of suburbs. And then here in the right-hand side, you see how irrelevant is the proposed thought program with the extent of permanent vulnerability in Adelaide from 1991 to 2021. This was the case of Adelaide, and I would like to go through quickly to the case of Melbourne for you, and then in part 4, David would work through the details of actual design. But going through the case study of Melbourne, Adelaide shows that political planning structure, if you remember, that was the 3rd priority, could affect the community health and well-being. But in case of Melbourne, I want to overlay 2 layers for you. Environmental context against socio-environmental vulnerability. And I want to show you something which you probably never seen before, a new perspective into system thinking for our cities.